a summary of Operation Gladio meets Secret Societies with Warhamster Brady, Part 2.
Hang on a second. I got a motorcycle going outside my window. probably picked that one up.
A little bit.
Sorry about that. That was not planned.
That's fine.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
We are going to try to sum up Skull and Bones today, part 2 of our grand finale. Well, I'll tell you, I could go for another 2-3 weeks if we had to, but it's time to move on to other fun stuff. So let's get this thing done.
Okay.
I am going to share my screen. So if everybody remembers, we started this whole series asking the question, is Skull and Bones just a regular fraternal organization wherever with just really good networking opportunities? There's a little bit more to it. You know, it's possible. If you were the kind of people that wanted to accumulate massive amounts of wealth and basically dominate the entire world trade, you know, exploit resources, cheap labor, control global events, would you be doing anything differently than they've done? And what you would do, of course, is you would want to put your people in key positions. Oh, I don't know, throughout the Senate, Congress, State Department, CIA, military, executive branch, judicial branch, corporations, institutions, NGOs, and that's exactly what Skull and Bones has done throughout the years. There's some places they just keep showing up more often than others, and it absolutely blows away any statistical probability that just this one college, this one secret society that's 15 members a year, founded in 1833, that we know of, there's been something like around 2,200 Skull and Bonesmen. Yet they show up in the strangest places. Can you bring my screen up?
I don't see it as an option.
Go down. Yep, there it is. You got it right there. Okay. So last week, we pointed out that there had been 3 presidents of the United States, Taft, Bush, and Bush. We had about 19 U.S. senators, 33 Congress critters, all kinds of people over at this Department of State, including up to Secretary of State, and about 18 U.S. ambassadors. And as we all know, the American embassy abroad, you're going to find a combination of State Department employees and CIA agents posing as State Department employees. Depending where you are, the ratios usually can be well over 50% the wrong way.
Tara said your sound is a little muffled, Brady. I don't know if you can...
You know what? I don't know why that is. It's not picking up my mic on the list here. Maybe if I unplug the mic. Is this any better?
It sounds better.
Okay. Something going on with my microphone. I'll just dump it for now. Okay. So, what we are going to today is to show you some more examples of this. I'm going to stop the share for now. I don't need it for this part. How about we want to dominate the state governments as well? We've had 14 Skull and Bones alumni as governors of their state.
As governors?
Yes, 14. Connecticut shows up 5 times, and we've had a few Rhode Island ones as well. All kinds of Bonesmen in state assemblies. I'm not going to bother listing them. Let's talk about the judiciary. How about 13 federal judges?
Wow.
3 chief justices of the Supreme Court. And of course, one of those federal judges is our good buddy, James Boasberg, the most powerful man in America. All kinds of state judges. But, I mean, think about the odds of it again. We've had, I think, 14 Supreme Court Chief Justices in history, and 3 of them Bonesmen.
Wow.
Yeah. All kinds of lawyers and founders of big law firms. All right, where else do we want to influence? Oh, we mentioned early on that there's all kinds of clergymen. A lot of these, most of the Northeast upper Eastern Seaboard, early settlers were Puritans, and so throughout the Bonesmen, we'll find people that are congregational ministers or congregationalists. A lot of Episcopalian, but it's influential. Um, I wonder how much of that ties into all these international ministries and missionaries.
Because they're everywhere.
Yeah. You think our intel agencies use the missions at all in foreign countries? Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, we've documented quite a few of them.
Yeah, my favorite example is our favorite story in Hawaii. All right, if you want to take over the world, do you think it would be a good idea to have, kind of your finger on the pulse of the media? We've had 14 people, Bonesmen, that were either founders of a major periodical or editor-in-chief or that position. That includes Henry Luce, co-founder of Time Life, the founder of the Chicago Tribune, Fortune Magazine, The New Yorker, National Review, so Buddy Buckley. Let's see, we've got some WAPO columnists, some New York Times columnists, all Bonesmen, and of course, the war pig, Robert Kagan himself.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. And there's probably even more that didn't make our list. Of course, you'd also want to influence academia. I found 23 Bonesmen that are professors. Most of all of them at Ivy League schools. I got Yale, Cornell, more Cornell. There's a Berkeley, there's a Harvard, Yale and Harvard. Everything from, here's one of my favorites. I'll get to him later. There's more Harvard. So the Ivy League is made up of Bonesmen. And why is that important? Who sets the agenda for what is going to be taught at colleges? That's the people that fund it, and these are the endowments that are behind. They're basically financed by these same East Coast blue bloods.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the little bit of research that I've done into this is that the president sets on the endowment for the university. So I know they have like a board of directors, but the president is always included in that.
Yeah, quite often I think that's the case. We'll see a lot of that play out in public with Trump's battle with Harvard's endowment. That's still ongoing. Okay. What else do we have? Oh, we've had 9 college presidents. Pretty good. We've had Bonesmen all over foundations. We've gone through the Carnegie Institute. We've gone through Rockefeller Foundation. There's Bonesmen running in and out. It's like a revolving door of Bonesmen, especially the Carnegie Institution for War. Carnegie Endowment for War. All right. Talk about the business leaders. I'm just going to go through some of the businesses that have Bonesmen either founded them or on their chair or the chairman or president. You see the same industry pop up over and over. You got a submarine company, Florida East Coast Railway, Northern Trust, Southern Railway, JP Morgan, another railroad executive, Brown Brothers Harriman. This is Percy Rockefeller. Brown Brothers Harriman, Standard Oil, Remington Arms, McCormick Reaper Ford, Morgan Stanley again, Brown Brothers Harriman. A lot of the Bonesmen work for the bank Brown Brothers Harriman. Why is that significant? Because they financed the Nazis, who the Bonesmen then helped get out of the country with Operation Paperclip.
Yep.
Okay, what other industries do we have? Oh, yeah, we got some lesser industries. Most people don't know what Dresser Industries is, but it later became a company called Halliburton, a war profiteer off the Iraq War. And it just so happens the original CEO of Dresser Industries is the guy that, well, basically he's the godfather of George H.W. Bush, one of his best friends, a guy by the name of Mallon. So a little bit of a connection to Halliburton and the Iraq War there.
Well, and I just did a show with Alpha, $140 billion since 2002 in contracts.
Say that again.
$140 billion with a B in contracts. A large chunk of that went to Halliburton.
Yeah.
The president of Halliburton was sitting. Who was he again? Oh, Cheney.
And Cheney's going to come up again today. It says, and then we can't have that out there without talking about how government contracting process works. I mean, the government pays probably twice as much as they should for just about anything they do, and it's a major. It's that old Thomas Sewell quote about, when you're buying stuff with other people's money, you don't care about the cost or the quality, and so Halliburton gets to mark everything up.
Well, what we found out, and I know this is true just from personal experience in working in the Department of Defense, how this whole contracting process works is who writes the requirements. And what we found in the Iraq War, when we got to the stage where we were going to basically turn over the military success to the coalition provisional government, the guy that was writing the requirement for the largest contract to date at that point was from MI6 in the coalition government. And when it was submitted to the State Department, because it was going to support the coalition government, a British company won it. That had only been in existence for 18 months, and solely because of the way the contract was written.
Yeah, it's a pretty corrupt process. It really is, and it's up and down government. You see that at the municipal level, the state level, but when you're talking about doing it on the international stage, now that's big bucks. So let's see, what else do we have here? We've got a chairman of the Manufacturers Hanover Trust Company. A lot of trust companies. We got a couple of people that were part of founding Pan American Airways. Now, why is that important?
Because Pan American Airways was Air America before Air America was Air America.
Bingo.
They are like lockstep with the CIA and before that.
All right, we got a few more big companies. We got the Heinz Company. Obviously, Heinz II was a Bonesman, and John Kerry Bonesman would actually marry into the Heinz family. We got the U.S. Trust Corporation again. Donaldson, Lufgren, Jeanette, DLJ, big broker dealer. Federal Express, which is a fun one. A company called Black Enterprise, which was founded by the first black Bonesman. We had Lampert, who founded EFL Investments, and he's the chairman of the failed Sears Holding Company. And then, of course, we have our good buddy Steven Schwarzman, who we featured, the founder of Blackstone. Anything happening around Blackstone these days?
Just a dead body.
Was she with the NFL?
I don't think so.
Okay. So that's a pretty good start for having your finger on just about everything, right?
Yes.
How about two U.S. Attorneys General, Taft and Everts? And I'm surprised it's only two.
Me too.
Yeah. We've had Bonesmen in all kinds of government agencies. Private secretaries to a president, treasury secretaries, postmaster generals, U.S. solicitor generals. What else do we have? Governor of the Philippines. We got the Bonesmen produced the first and the second chief of the U.S. Forestry Service.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
What time frame was that?
It's like right at the foundation. I think it's 1930s or so. I mean, we talked about it on a previous show,
Yeah.
but and I think you had a pretty good theory of why that is. What else do we have? More Philippines, another Treasury Secretary. Oh, the first chairman of the New York Federal Reserve. And for those who don't know, they say there's 9 Federal Reserve banks, but there's really only one. The New York Fed's the only one that matters. And that's where the money.
Yep.
That's where the money moves. And so you think about this. A lot of Bonesmen are involved. Well, a lot of the robber barons are involved with the founding of the Federal Reserve. And the Bonesman becomes the very first chair of the New York Fed. So we have another New York Fed director. New York City president of the bar. Another president of the New York Fed. Librarian of Congress. Some U.S. attorney. National Center for Atmospheric Research. The Securities Exchange Commission. The Export-Import Bank. We've had a few of those. Another chairman of the FTC. A director of the National Institute of Mental Health.
Of mental health?
Yes.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's guy by the name of Cowdery. We talked about him before. You want me to?
Yeah.
You want me to pull some up?
No, I just, again, with MK Ultra and stuff like that, it just is amazing where they're all at.
Yeah, they're everywhere. I mean, I'm just giving you all these names to see if the numbers just overwhelm you. You say, okay, this has got to be more than just a handshake.
Yes.
All right. So let's get to the really fun stuff today. I think these last 2 points are really going to hammer it home. You want to control the world, global commerce, all that stuff like that. You probably ought to have some of your people in the intelligence agencies, wouldn't you think?
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to back speed up. Just navigating to my screen real quick. You can get to the right side. Any thoughts?
And the point. Go ahead.
Okay, any thoughts so far?
The point to be made about the significance in the intelligence, because I have to say this every opportunity, the intelligence apparatus does not work for the country that it's associated with. It works for everybody he just talked about, the railroad barons, the bankers, the major trusts. They protect their interests, not ours.
Yeah, a lot of the intel agencies, they get their orders. Originally, I think the first orders were coming from the Council of Foreign Relations, which is embedded with that in the heads of major corporations, international corporations, and of course, a lot of Bonesmen are part of that. You've seen some other organizations, probably in the marching orders, think tanks like the Hoover Institute, I'd say the Atlantic Council, definitely the Trilateral Commission. And these are the strangleholds of all where the information goes and what countries are going to need to be taken out, what leaders.
Right. Right.
All right, so let's share this screen.
It should come up. There we go.
Okay. CIA and intelligence. Think we've had any Bonesmen from there? We've talked about Charles Whitehouse before. That is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's father. He was the Skull and Bones class of 1947. Goes directly to the CIA from 47 to 56. And he worked in places like Congo, Turkey, Belgium, Cambodia. Anything interesting happened in those countries in those years?
The Congo. Well, when was he there?
From 47 to 56.
So that's when it was still under the control of Belgium. And that's when they were mining the uranium for the nuclear weapon that was dropped on Japan. So just a little bit. And obviously it shows that he's the ambassador to Thailand. And the interesting time frame of when he was in Thailand is it's the transition from the opium production into Afghanistan. So they would have been tying up loose ends there. And obviously, all of the rest of them. Belgium is a part of NATO, obviously, NATO headquarters eventually. And the former Belgium colonies in Africa, all loaded with resources. So he's a resource controller.
Yeah, very much so. He's got an interesting story. He's left. He was in Yale, joined the Marines for World War II. He was a Marine dive bomber pilot who got 7 distinguished flying crosses and 21 air medals. So he's a pilot. Goes back to Yale, becomes a Bonesman. He's a class of William Buckley. Joins the CIA. Was predated the 1960 Colombo coup. In Cambodia, he was back in the Vietnamese Khmer Rouge supply line. In 56.
And by the way, that's when we were setting up the opium.
Oh, yeah. So then he moves to the State Department in 56, and he sat on the State Department's Congo desk officer in 1959. He was also over in Vietnam in 72. We talked about that. We were going through the... Yeah, talked about that. Okay, so that's Mr. Charles Whitehouse. Next up, we're going to talk about Evan Galbraith. Is he up there pretty good? Let me put him in the right spot so everyone can see him. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, Mr. Evan Galbraith, Skull and Bones class of 1950. He was the U.S. naval attaché to the CIA from 1953 to 1957. What else do we need to know about him? He would then
Department of Defense advisor to NATO.
Yep.
Which runs Operation Gladio.
Uh-huh. What else?
And 53 to 57 is a critical time, too. If you look at the different things that were going on as it relates to Operation Gladio, very, very important time for him to be inside the CIA.
Yeah, very much so. He's one of those Forrest Gumps, shows up in some amazing places. He'd go on to become the ambassador to France, et cetera, et cetera. But he's definitely primetime spook, I would say. Is there anything else?
No.
That's good for him. Okay. One of my favorites. F. Truby Davison. Skull and Bones class of 1918. And we did a feature on him earlier. He established something called the first Yale Air Unit. And basically a bunch of a lot of Bonesmen, a group of like a dozen Yaleys, all flying aficionados, amateur pilots, got in contact with the Pentagon. Do we have a Pentagon yet? Whatever, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War, said, "Hey,
Secretary of War."
Yeah, said we'd like to, volunteer to be part of the United States Air Defense, like Homeland pilots," and they actually got it to go through. A lot of these guys were then enlisted in the military, which is where he got in there. And he was a World War I aviator. That's why I got a picture of him in his plane. Oops. Give me 1 second. Can you imagine flying an open cockpit plane like that?
I obviously have read a lot of history about open cockpit. So just a quick aside. They were... During the time they were flying open cockpit, they were trying to perfect how to do in-flight refueling. And the aviation fuel that they used back in the day would burn your skin. And there's a lot of the most famous, like Lieutenant Chanute and Lieutenant Grissom, that were all involved in that. And they have horror stories of the nozzle coming off and spraying jet fuel all over them. So, yeah, it was a very hazardous job.
Indeed. Got to give the guys a little bit of credit. That's not easy. That's not an easy tour of duty. So he becomes a World War I aviator. Um, Goes back to Columbia Law. Gets involved in the New York State Legislature, and then he gets named as the Assistant Secretary of War for Air in 1926 to 1933, which is interesting. He was basically working as a lawyer, and now he gets called back to have a pretty important choke point position in the military.
Yes.
Goes back to private practice. He becomes a trustee of Yale University, and then he becomes the first director of personnel for the CIA. Yeah.
That's a big gatekeeper job. That's the guy that vets all of the businessmen that they turned into CIA officers.
Yep, very much so. So I think he fits in our spook category.
Yeah.
Last side note I have on him is that he was the president of the American Museum of Natural History. We've talked about how these people use philanthropies and charitable organizations, not only for social networking, but also for a lot of business and, so let's say, other type of deal making. So a lot of these things like museums and like metropolitan operas and stuff like that, you're going to see these people on their boards of directors or what have you.
Well, and interestingly enough, the museum on the culture part of the culture war, he would be crafting what people remember of history.
Yeah, that's an important point. I think we talked about that before, but thanks for bringing that back up. All right. You see how we have another line here for Davison?
Uh-huh.
Because he's down in the next category where we talk about the military connections. But all right. William Howard Taft III. He's not a Bonesman. He did go to Yale, but I'm bringing him up because he has his father, grandfather, great-grandfather. Well, we're all Bonesmen. His great-grandfather is one of the founders of Skull and Bones. His grandfather's William Howard Taft. How they missed this guy being a Bonesman, I don't know, but you tell me if he belongs on this list. So in 1949, he worked for the Marshall Plan in Dublin, Ireland.
And of course, the Marshall Plan was seed money for Operation Gladio.
We had a lot of CIA operations, but it's specifically Gladio. A lot of the money that went to Marshall Plan got siphoned off in Greece and Italy. So that's this guy. He's there. He works from the CIA directly in the Department of Defense as the liaison from 1951 to 53. Then he goes, of course, to the State Department in 1957, and he's in places like Mozambique, where he was there right at the start of the Portuguese colonial war started. And I got a typo.
Well, let me just also say that the time that he was the CIA liaison to the Department of Defense was in preparation for the overthrow of Iran. And I found out that the Department of Defense was training stay-behind units in southern Iran as part of the prep for the coup of Mossadegh, and he would have been the liaison working to get the MAG, the military advisory group, into southern Iraq to set up the stay-behind units with the tribes down there.
Yeah, kind of place you'd want to have a Bonesman. Someone who can be trusted.
Yeah.
All right, our next guy's fun. This is Lewis A. Lapham, Skull and Bones, class of 1931. He was a World War II civilian executive assistant general in the command of the San Francisco port. Why is that important?
Tell us.
Well, ports are where things come in and out that may or may not want other people knowing about.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. In 1945, hang on, I'm going to pull up some more notes on him real quick. Oh, yeah, he also went to high school at the Hotchkiss School. one of our grooming schools. Okay, then he becomes, 45, the president of the Pacific American Steamship Association, and he was the last president of the American Hawaiian Steamship Company. Steamships played a big part of the story early on. Shipping's been a big part of shenanigans we did all throughout the Caribbean and South America. He would then leave and join the Bankers Trust and hold various board positions. Bankers Trust is one of the big management trust companies that we see in a lot of our deeper dives into some of the CIA shenanigans.
Yeah, they come up a lot.
Let's see, what else do we have on him? Yeah, Bankers Trust would then end up merging with Alex Brown and Sons, who are actually related to the Brown Brothers Harriman. So, but of course, why is he important here? Because he was the general counsel for the CIA from 1976 to 1979.
What was going on 76 to 79 when Jimmy Carter had conducted his Halloween massacre and fired the entire covert operations branch of the CIA, and they were setting up the Jimmy Carter coup called the revolution in Iran, where the CIA people were working behind the scenes with the Ayatollah in order to hold on to the prisoners, the hostages, which preponderantly were CIA assets and agents that were supposedly kidnapped out of the embassy. And Bush was working with the Ayatollah to hold on to them so Reagan could win and they could sabotage Carter's reelection.
Indeed. I'll take that even further, what's going on right there. 1975 was the Church Committee, which exposed the CIA's dirty laundry for the world to see.
Yes.
Bush was brought in to clean that up, and he brings Lapham in with him, his fellow Bonesmen. This is right before the CIA had to start using NGOs and other things like the NED, National Endowment for Democracy, to start doing their covert operations around the world.
And Bush set up the Safari Club in Kenya with Adon Shikogi to house all of those fired covert operators and give them employment to maintain covert operations outside of the CIA during that time as well.
Yeah, I'd say Lapham's kind of an important guy in our history that doesn't get talked about too much.
Yes.
And they're setting the groundwork, up for what would come 2 years later, the beginnings of Iran-Contra.
Yeah.
All right. So Bush did his job well.
All of them. He had a lot of jobs.
Next guy we're going to talk about is our old friend William F. Buckley Jr., Mr. Conservative himself, right?
Yeah.
Bonesman class of 1950, served at Fort Benning in World War II. He always stayed stateside. But what's going on at Fort Benning?
Fort Benning, you mean, right?
I think it's Banning. If I got the spelling wrong, I don't know.
I think it's Fort Benning. Because Fort Benning is where the School of Americas was ran out of.
Let me just double check. No, I'll get it later.
Yeah.
He gets out of college. He goes straight to the CIA, where he worked directly under E. Howard Hunt.
Yep.
Who's E. Howard Hunt? Oh, I don't know. He was at the Bay of Pigs. He was in Dallas when Kennedy was shot. And he also happened to be the guy who led the Watergate break-in. Yeah.
Among other things. He was everywhere. He was in Operation Condor. He was over in Vietnam. He shows up. He's like the, what do you call them when they show up everywhere?
Forrest Gump.
He is the Forrest Gump of the CIA.
Yeah. And Buckley works directly for him. Buckley would then believe this found the National Review, this supposed new conservative movement going on. It's being led by a bone. This is where the neocons come from. This guy is the thought leader of the neocon movement. We did a full feature on the Buckley family. He's got brothers and other relatives that are Bonesmen. This guy's
And if I'm not mistaken, E. Howard Hunt's kids, Buckley is their godfather. Because they were together in Mexico.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, enough on Buckley. One of my all-time favorites, this guy by the name of William Sloane Coffin. I'll get them all on screen. Here we go. That's the best I can do. Funny looking guy, right?
He looks like Bozo the Clown.
He's a Bonesman, class of 1949. His father was the president of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So he came from the highbrow family. His uncle was when we talked about Henry Sloane Coffin, who was the class of 1897, and who became the president of the Union Theological Seminary, which is at Columbia University. We've been concentrating on Yale CIA connections, and we're going to have to do a show or two on Columbia because that's a huge recruiting spot for
Yes. Yeah, it was.
CIA.
Yeah.
And it just recently made the news. I think you saw it. I put a tweet out yesterday about that.
Yeah.
The founder of the OSS is from Columbia, Wild Bill Donovan. And a lot of the early people they got weren't just businessmen. They got a lot of academics. A lot of them were. And it's,
yes.
So that's William Sloane Coffin, his father, or his uncle. He's good buddies with George H.W. Bush. They both went to high school at the Phillips Academy. He applies to the OSS in 1943 and gets denied by, this is a exact quote, by not having Gaelic features, G-A-L-I-C. They didn't think he was handsome enough to be a spy.
Well, it's hard having Bozo for a spy.
All right. Oops. Instantly, his brother-in-law, this guy by the name of Frank Lindsay, was the head of the Office of Policy Coordination for the Pentagon.
And for those of you who don't know, that's the conduit of the CIA into the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm. And so a few years later, he gets into the CIA as a case officer. And what's he do there? He serves as West Germany recruiting anti-Soviet Russian refugees.
All of the anti-communists that will end up in the World Anti-Communist League.
Sure. That's what this guy's doing for 4 years. Yep. He goes home, goes back to Yale Seminary, Yale Divinity School, and he ends up running Riverside Church and also the United Church of Christ. And he becomes a very, very, I would say, loud proselytizer.
And isn't Riverside the Riverside in California?
No, the church is not named after that, if I'm not
mistaken.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's William Sloane Coffin. Once you're in the CIA, you never leave the CIA.
Yeah.
So what is what do we call these guys? Like evangelical people that
right.
Yeah. Could they be useful as a CIA tool?
Well, when you're wanting to push things like eventually the 501c3 and so that you can control churches, they would absolutely be instrumental to have a few of your CIA assets in leadership positions in large churches. Oh, and especially if you want to run human trafficking.
Indeed. There was a question in the chat about whether he wrote any spy novels, and I may have that. No, I don't. Sorry about that. My notes are not perfect. I can't write everything down. The other comment I saw earlier was from Tara asked where did Cheney originate, and somebody answered they came to this country in the 1640s. That's true. We're going to mention that here in a second, so I will get back to that topic as it's pertinent. All right, our next intel-related guy, someone we talked about last week a little bit, one David Boren. Pictured here is the president of the University of Oklahoma. Skull and Bones class of 1963. He's a Rhodes Scholar. Why is that important? Because the Rhodes Scholars are not a secret society. We send people over there to learn the British way of doing things.
Primarily the MI6 way of doing things.
Yeah. He would become the chairman when he becomes a senator. He's the chairman of the Select Committee on Intelligence, 1987 to 1993. Why is that an important date?
Holy crap. Because this is in the aftermath of Iran-Contra leading into the Iraq War.
Yeah. And it's also right when the investigation into Iran-Contra is going on, and you're catching the part of the BCCI investigation overlaps with it.
Yeah.
And this so he's at the head of the Senate. The biggest deep state part of the entire U.S. government is the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And he's the
director. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So he was the gatekeeper to make sure only what they wanted to happen with the Iran-Contra happened, and then to make sure that the beginning of the Iraq War I, the only intelligence that was saw is what they wanted.
Spidia in chat says the Riverside Church is the Rockefeller-founded church in Manhattan. I thought it was New York, but the Rockefeller-founded stuff missed that one. So thank you very much. That's good info. Rockefeller, of course, has their tendrils all over every bit of the story. Interesting note about David Boren. He was a mentor of the CIA director, George Tenet, and they were having breakfast together in Manhattan on the morning of 9/11.
To watch the fireworks.
Apparently. They got a good, hope they got a good view. He'd be brought back to be the co-chair of Obama's Intelligence Advisory Board. So, President's Intelligence Advisory Board is a rather new thing, but look at who sat on this original board. It's kind of a who's who of deep state.
Well, and what's important about that is all of the stuff that was going on with Obama and the drone usage, all of that stuff. So he would have been overseeing all of that.
Yeah, and there's quite a few color revolutions going on during the Obama Arab Spring.
Yeah.
And he's on the advisory board as we're doing all that shenanigans.
Yeah.
So I'd say he makes our Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And of course, our last intelligence-related Bonesman, of course, is George H.W. Bush, who we've talked about ad nauseum, so I'll go through him pretty quick, but he's kind of the granddaddy of a lot of this stuff as well. Bonesman class of 48, Academy, goes out and founds Zapata Corporation. Guy with no oil experience whatsoever. Founds an oil company, Zapata, that operates in Central and South America. And does it have any connection to any CIA operation that you're aware of?
A lot, because of their dealings with the oil rigs in the Gulf and their use of them for the Bay of Pigs, both logistically as far as supply hubs. What they were doing is they were shipping weapons onto oil rigs, the mobile oil rigs. He had a whole thing with mobile oil rigs. And they would then take those weapons and attack Cuba. Also, there is documentation that I've come across where they were actually doing paramilitary training on the oil rigs out of sight of everybody.
Yeah, and like I said, we've done a couple features on the Bush family, so we're not going to re-litigate that entire thing. But that's a big point.
Yeah.
He gets done doing that, and somehow he's qualified to become the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations from 1971 to 73. What's his qualification? Then he becomes the chair of the Republican National Committee in 73, 74 to clean up the mess of Watergate. He's a fixer. He was Ford's liaison to China in 1974. This is a big deal. The Bushes became gatekeepers to any business that wanted. Oh, China had just been opened up in 71, and there's a Bonesmen there we talked about last week.
Yeah.
For those negotiations. Well, Bush becomes the gatekeeper of all businesses doing business in China, so he's got deep China connections. He becomes the director of CIA from 1976 to 77. And what's his qualification for being director of the CIA? He's got no experience, or was he working with the CIA the entire time with Zabata?
I'm saying that he was working the entire time because we have evidence that he was in the CIA when he had all of those jobs, going back to the late 1950s.
Yeah, I think it's indisputable. You just don't get the director of the CIA with no relationship to the organization and no intelligence work at all, apparently, officially.
Well, I also found out that Bush, and this is not reported anywhere, when the Office of Public Safety was closed in 1974 because it was all discovered, thanks to the Church Commission and the Pike Commission, that the Office of Public Safety was running all of the kidnapping, torture, and disappearing as of Operation Condor, as you note on there, that the Office of Public Safety was shut down. However, running simultaneous with the Office of Public Safety was a company called PSSI, which was Public Safety Something International. And that company, when it merged with Vanell, Brown and Root, which is a precursor to the KBR Brown and Root, Kellogg Brown and Root now, the president at the time that was picking up PSSI, the torture, kidnapping, and disappearing group, was none other than President George H.W. Bush. So it was an off-the-books, PSSI was an off-the-books way of paying what I refer to now as mercenaries under the Office of Public Safety, which was the CIA front under USAID. And when Byron Ingalls, who was the guy that was running it, decides he wants to retire, it's handed off to Vanell, Brown and Root, and this guy was the president of it. Yeah, so literally a torture, kidnapping, and assassination group. So he had plenty of experience to be the CIA director.
Just not publicly.
Just not publicly.
So I put a couple other notes on him when he was Reagan's VP. He was given an awful lot of authority. Reagan's famous quote, my VP's got more probably involvement in international diplomacy than any VP in history. A couple of the initiatives that he spearheaded, one was the deregulation of the banking system.
Deregulation of what? You cut out.
Deregulation of the banking system, which is a real fun coincidence because it led directly into the savings and loan scandals of the 1980s, which his Bushes were all over.
Correct.
Yeah. He's the guy who deregulated the banks and said, calls his brothers, his cousins, say, hey, get involved in these S&Ls. You're going to make money. And they did. And the last thing, of course, is the former director of the CIA to be in charge of tackling international drug smuggling.
Yeah. Probably the biggest note to me while he was VP is that he ran the Iran-Contra out of his office. Felix Rodriguez, a Cuban exile that is an assassin. He was in El Salvador. He was the guy in the room when they murdered Che Guevara. He was in Vietnam, everywhere. he was reporting to Donald Gregg, who was Bush's national security advisor. So Donald Gregg was basically his operations guy for Iran-Contra, and Felix Rodriguez was his assistant.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about Iran-Contra quite a bit, but, you know, it might even be bigger than we have let on. I mean, it is a big deal. All right, we're going to finish up our military bonesmen. And I wanted to do this last because when you start seeing all the connections of skull and bones to the brass of our military, anytime there's any kind of a conflict throughout the war, we already know they're in the intelligence. I've already seen them in diplomacy. We see how widespread their fingerprint is on the military. I think it's going to make the closing argument into being a lot more than a criminal organization. Fair enough?
Yep.
All right, let's do it. Okay. Military. All right. One of the co-founders of Skull and Bones was William Huntington Russell, co-founder class of 1833. He was a major general in the Connecticut militia in 1863 during the War of Northern Aggression. I got to get my Lincoln dig in every once in a while. He gets named to the Board of Visitors by the Secretary of War in 1863. Board of Visitors was a big deal back then. He was running a prep school, and he had long foreseen that the Civil War was going to happen. He was a Lincoln supporter. He trained all his boys that went to his school to be militarily ready. He taught them how to shoot, everything like that. So he was always involved in that. And he's one of the founders of the Republican Party that put Lincoln into power when the war started. So that was Mr. William Huntington Russell. Also started the Russell Trust, which finances Skull and Bones throughout the century. So he's got a big military connection. Next one, of course, is Alphonso Taft, the other co-founder of Skull and Bones. He was the Secretary of War under Grant in 1876, and those were the Indian Wars. Under him was the Black Hills War, and right when he left is when the Bighorn happened. So he was an Indian war pig, actually. He was really pushing it hard. He became the U.S. Attorney General in 1876-77, became the ambassador to Austria-Hungary, and then to Russia. We talked about that last week. Of course, he is the patriarch of the Taft family of Bonesmen, and we've talked, obviously, the President Taft and a few others. But obviously, he is a Bonesman, intimately tied to the military. Next, we have Rene Otto Stanford Ferry. See the picture of the senator from Connecticut. He was a Bonesman class of 1844. In 1847, he became a lieutenant colonel in the 12th Regiment of Connecticut Militia. Serves in Congress in 1859-61. And there he was on what's called the Committee of 33. Have we talked about the Committee of 33?
I don't remember.
Give me a second. That's one of the steering committees of they were trying really hard to avoid trying to keep the South from seceding. They failed. So he then joins what's called the Cassius Clay Guard. Cassius Clay was not Muhammad Ali. It was Muhammad Ali. Named after that. But he was a Civil War era commander. Then Ferry becomes a brigadier general in the Union Army, and he notoriously fought against Stonewall Jackson at the Battle of Cedar Mountain. These bonesmen get around, right?
Yeah.
Next guy we have is a John Donnell Smith. Here's a lieutenant of him. He's a first lieutenant following the Battle of Chancellorsville. He was Bonesman class of 1847. He was a botanist. You notice that uniform doesn't look very blue?
Yeah, it looks very Confederate-ish.
Yeah, he's a captain in the Confederate Army. The guy was from Louisiana, I believe. So, And we got to take a look at, we talked about Thomas Crockett before. There he is, wearing his Union uniform. Picture of him as the U.S. ambassador to Bolivia. He's class of 57. He also joined the Freemasons in 1857. He was Skull and Bones and a Freemason. We haven't seen a lot of that before, at least that we knew of. In 1861, Lincoln appoints him as a lieutenant colonel in the 4th Kentucky Mounted Infantry. He became a colonel in 1863 and had a famous battles with famous Southern General Mason Bedford Forrest. He became a brigadier general at the age of 18. I think that's supposed to say 19. That doesn't sound right. Maybe it's 27. I typed it wrong. Yeah, it was 27.
It's still very early.
Yeah. And he would lead a cavalry campaign in the Atlanta campaign. You know, the one where they burned it to the ground?
Yeah.
Women and children included?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
that one.
Yeah, this guy was on a horse watching that happen. And he would command the District of Southwest Georgia until 1855. That's a military district. After the war, basically the South lived for a number of years under military occupation. It wasn't just shake hands and go home.
But isn't that what we did to the Philippines and Puerto Rico and Cuba and all of our assessed territories?
Sounds rather imperial to me, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, more military. Got to go to our buddy, old William Howard Taft himself. Of course, he's the 27th president of the United States, class of 1878. He was Teddy Roosevelt's Secretary of War from 1904 to 1908 before becoming president. Anything going on in 1904 to 1908?
Oh, I think we were doing some activity in Latin America, weren't we?
Just a bit. Why don't we ask Major General Stanley Butler about that?
Yeah. At the time, Major Butler, when they were stealing Panama from Colombia.
Uh-huh. That's Mr. Taft, great president. Lost to Woodrow Wilson, unfortunately. He worked against the war in something called the League to Enforce Peace, which was later replaced by the League of Nations, with different ideals. And he was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court later on in 1921, and he ended up being buried at Arlington Cemetery, which is interesting for a guy who didn't serve. He was just Secretary of War. How did he become Secretary of War? What was his credentials?
How'd he what?
How's he become Secretary of War? What are his credentials? Son of the founder of the Skull and Bones, maybe?
It's his last name.
Yeah. Of course, we have skipped your good buddy, Henry Stimson. I got a lot to write here, so I'm going to make sure everyone can read it. Okay. He is Bonesmen class of 1888. Of course, he went to private grooming school, Phillips Andover. 1906, he becomes the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and he prosecuted antitrust cases. Antitrust cases.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say you forgot the air quotes.
Yeah, I say, if people don't know, I call them antitrust cases need air quotes because they talk about Teddy Roosevelt busting the trusts, and he did no such thing. They just basically reorganized into the modern day corporation. At the same time, they figured out how do we get away from regulation and taxation. They went out and created the tax-free foundation as well. That's why we have the corporate structure we do today, is because of a great job busting the trusts.
And let me add the other two parts. The other two parts of the modern day corporation, because prior to this, and you could just take Rockefeller, the railroads, all of those, they basically used their monopolies, which they all had, to control labor and the trade. So in addition to the quote unquote antitrust, they created trade associations. So the trade associations were under the control of the same oligarchs. The labor unions were under the control of the oligarchs, as we've seen, because the mafia would just come visit them, if not put their own people in it. And so this was a stealth way of them to look like they had separated the ownership from the trade associations from the workers, when in fact there was no separation from them at all. It was just a veneer.
Yeah. The trusts are, of course, owned by the Gilded Age robber barons. And we've seen the Gilded Age robber barons throughout Skull and Bones. So why would you not want a Bonesman prosecuting the cases against his buddies?
Yeah.
All right, so then he gets named the Secretary of War by Taft in 1911 to 1913. He resigned when Wilson got in. He becomes a colonel in the Army in World War I. So you go from being the Secretary of War to a colonel in the Army. Talk about a demotion. He would become a founding member of the Council of Foreign Relations, who gives the orders to the CIA. New York Times describes him as the group's quintessential member. So not only is he one of the founders of the CIA, he's the quintessential, the CFR, he's the quintessential member. Then he gets sent by Coolidge to Nicaragua to negotiate the end of their civil war. And he writes famously, "They were not fitted for the responsibilities that go with independence and self-government." This was a racist comment. He says these people cannot govern themselves.
Well, to me, it's not even, I don't even look at these as race. This is a elite view of the world that comes out of the Fabian Society. If you are not white, you are not fit to, or if you are not from their establishment, I didn't mean to say white. If you are not from their establishment, they look down on anybody, even poor white people. They look down on anyone that was not from the elite. And they oftentimes said comments like this. When I've been looking at Operation Gladio and the setups for all of the coups that happened all over the world, person after person after person after person that is from this elitist group, that's what they said about the entire continent of Africa. And that's what they said about the entire Latin America group. That is their view, that they're heathens because they're not one of them, and they have no ability to be in charge of their own destination. So they need this elite group to guide them. And that's the entire principle behind one world government, because we're all too stupid.
Great points. Chat's saying my voice coming in and out. I'm getting some static and feedback.
If you faced directly to the thing, it's when you turn your head that the volume goes a little weird.
I'm going to see if I can real quick get it to pick up my microphone on my, so maybe it'll be better. And it's just not. Rumble's not seeing it, unfortunately. So this is we're gonna have to put up with what I got. My apologies. Okay. Where were we? Okay. He gets sent by Coolidge to Nicaragua.
Yeah, we went through that one. We're at the governor one, the governor general.
General of the Philippines, 27 to 29. Then Secretary of State from 29 to 33. And then FDR appoints him Secretary of War from 1940 to 45, 10 days before the Pearl Harbor attack. Yeah, he knew. And he also had he's Secretary of War for all of World War II. And of course, he had direct control over the atom bomb project.
Well, and understand that World War II bombing campaign that saved all of their buddies' investments in World War II would have been under his stewardship.
Yeah. Okay, next guy we're going to look at is Hugh Aiken Bain. Don't have a picture of him because I guess he wasn't that important. but I brought him up for a reason. He's Bonesman class of 1890. He had a lot on him. He's interesting. He was an alumni of the law firm we talked about before, Cadwalader, Wickersham, and Taft. Very important law firm. Cadwalader was the Assistant Secretary of State under Ulysses Grant. Wickersham was the U.S. Attorney General under Taft, Attorney General. And Henry Waters Taft was the Bonesman class of 1880 and also president of the Council on Foreign Relations. That's the law firm this guy works for, okay?
Yeah.
He would marry the sister of Knight Drexler Cheney Jr., who was a Bonesman classmate of Baines. And, of course, this guy is his cousin to Dick Cheney through their ancestors who are blue blood, immigrated to America in the 17th century. So that's the Cheney connection.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah. World War I, he serves in Adjutant General's office and is the counsel on prisoners of war mission and liquidation commission on War Department. So he's one of the gatekeepers. And after the war, he serves on the Reparation Commission under the Treaty of Versailles, the Treaty of Saint-Germain, and he's a judge. And a couple of his big judgments. The guy, Belgium versus Austria on the treasure of the Order of the Golden Fleece, had to do with reparations. The other one is Standard Oil, Rockefeller Company, had to pay reparations because 21 of their oil tankers were owned by a German subsidiary of Standard Oil, and he's the judge who can pay those reparations. But kind of an interesting career, huh?
Uh-huh.
All right. Next guy we have is our F. Ruby Davison, who we talked about in the CIA part, so I'm not going to repeat ourselves. He was the Secretary of War for Air. Then we get Arthur Lamb Gates. That's him on the left. Why is he important? He is a Bonesman, class of 1918. In World War I, he flew for the 1st Yale unit, founded by a fellow Bonesman. And then he would end up getting a Navy Distinguished Service Medal, Great Britain's Distinguished Flying Cross, France's Croix de Guerre, Cross of War, and he got the French Legion of Honor. So apparently very well decorated. And for his troubles, he becomes the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Air from 1941 to 45, working alongside a bunch of his Bonesman brothers. And he was actually in charge of naval aviation efforts in World War II.
Again, making sure you avoid all of the U.S. investment in Germany on the target list.
Indeed.
That should have been on the target list that never made it on the target list.
Yeah. He becomes briefly the Undersecretary of the Navy, June of 45 to September of 45, so very brief. And then
so wait a minute. I think this is kind of a foot stomper here. You've got the Department of War guy for air, and you have the Navy air guy, and they're both associated with Bonesmen, making sure that none of their investments in World War II. Holy crap. Okay. All right.
I told you these military connections. I think it's the icing on the cake we've been trying to bake.
My gosh. Because I'm reading a book right now about the bombing campaign and the avoidance of like IG Farben and all of those. IG Farben was in a 7-story building. It was like the biggest target, and they didn't touch it.
Yeah. I actually had pictures of that. It's interesting.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Now we know why.
Okay, so he goes into the private sector afterwards. Of course he does. And he became a director of some pretty big companies. You got the New York Trust Company, Union Pacific Railroad, Bonesmen Central Time Magazine,
CIA Central.
Boeing, big defense
Wow.
company, Safeway, and of course Abercrombie and Fitch. And little footnote, of course, he would marry Alice Truby Davison, whose sister was F. Truby Davison, who we just saw right here.
Holy moly.
Keep it in the family, right?
Yep.
Okay. Our next bonesman is a guy you know and love, Robert Lovett.
Yeah.
Okay, what do we know about Robert? Bonesman class of 1918. He was one of the 6 wise men that crafted the Cold War. He would marry an Adele Corderly Brown, the daughter of James Brown from the Brown brothers Harriman family. Keeping in the family again.
Yeah.
He also flew in the first Yale unit. Kind of important campus activity, don't you think?
Yeah.
He would become a World War I lieutenant commander, a partner at Brown Brothers Harrington in 1926. And in 1940, he became the special assistant for air affairs under bonesman Henry Stimson. I mean, is this just one happy family?
Yeah.
I got some more on Lovett here. Let me just grab it. Yeah, his dad was the president of Pacific Union Pacific Railroad. So Truman refuses his resignation, and they ask him to chair what's called the Lovett Committee. The Lovett Committee advised the government on post-World War II organization of intelligence activities and led directly to the creation of the CIA. That is Lovett.
Yes.
He goes back to work for Brown Brothers Harriman, only to be recalled by George Marshall, who helped implement the Vandenberg Resolution, and which led to the establishment of NATO. So this guy's helped create the CIA and NATO.
And they're going to use it extensively to protect their investments.
And Marshall was in bad health, so Lovett does most of the heavy lifting in implementing the Marshall Plan, which, shall we repeat, was funneling money to Operation Gladio.
Correct.
Yeah, that's Robert Lovett. Gets back in the investment business and then gets recalled again and by Marshall to become the Deputy Secretary of Defense. By 1951, he was the U.S. Secretary of Defense, directing the Korean War and arguing for a bigger military at all times. Goes back to Brown Brothers Harriman until 1956. Eisenhower persuades him to join the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, because of course he does.
And again, Eisenhower did several coups, and the Mossadegh, Guatemala, the Congo, and this guy's right in the middle of it.
Yep. Quite a career for Mr. Lovett, would you not say?
Yeah, and so just kind of to foot stomp, this guy laid the entire foundation for Operation Gladio.
Yeah, and the Cold War itself. And the book was written by the Wise Men, 6 Friends in the World They Made. It was written by Walter Isaacson and Evan Thomas, and those 6 were a couple names we've heard before.
And also, just to kind of foot stomp the Cold War, the first probably 5 years, no, probably 10 years, every bit of the intelligence was a lie. We didn't have a bomber or a missile deficit. The creation of the Cold War itself, the idea of a Cold War was based on the fact that Russia was any minute going to come over the Volga Gap and wipe out Europe when they had 50 million people dead and no industry to do it. the entire thing was a lie, and this guy was part of crafting that lie.
Indeed. I want to hammer home the wise men angle of this, though. Like I said, this is a book about who basically formed the post-World War II world, the Cold War. There's 6 of them. There's a Charles, who was the ambassador to the USSR and part of the Porcelain Club. There was George Kennan, who we've talked about. And then you have 4 Bonesmen, Dean Atkinson, W. Averill Harriman, Robert Levitt, and John J. Frickin' McCloy.
Yeah.
What this book is saying is that the Skull and Bonesmen basically made up Skull and Bones designed the latter half of the 20th century. Everything we went through was through Bonesmen.
Yes. And it was their exploitation of the world via coups of Operation Gladio that they set up.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the most damning facts we've come up with, for the
yes.
Okay.
They laid the foundation for Operation Gladio, implemented it, and then used it for their own benefit.
We could stop right there, but I've got a few more. So what the heck? Let's pick it up. Here we have a David Sinton Ingalls, who's Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Air. He is class of 1920. And, of course, his mother was a niece of President Taft, because why wouldn't he? And he would later manage Robert Taft's presidential campaign. Robert Taft ran for president as a Republican in, I think, the 50s, but didn't get anywhere. Of course, he went to elite grooming school, St. Paul's, and he's a member of the 1st Yale unit. This guy was the U.S. Navy's only ace of World War I. He had 6 victories. The very first naval aviator to become an ace.
The ace is shooting down the enemy aircraft.
Yeah. It's 6 to be an ace or 5?
5.
Okay. Yeah, this guy got 6. He did a little extra. And if you do homework on this guy, there's some really interesting stories about his. It's well documented, his flying career. He would become the Assistant Secretary of the Navy 1929-32, and then a director of Pan Am Air Ferries.
So, of course.
Yeah. So he's Assistant Secretary of the Navy, while another Bonesman is the Secretary of War, and then he goes straight to Pan Am, and yeah. And, of course, he married a Louise Hale Harkness, whose grandfather was one of J.D. Rockefeller's closest business partners when they founded Standard Oil. Just to close that knot again. See any patterns yet?
Yep. All in the family.
All right, let's talk about Charles Spofford. That's this gentleman right here. Okay, what do we know about him? Bonesman class of 1924. He's an Army Brigadier General in World War II, where he gets, check this out, a Purple Heart, Distinguished Service Medal, Legion of Honor, again, the Croix de Guerre, and the Order of the British Empire.
That's impressive.
Yeah. After that, it becomes the Assistant Chief of Staff of the Military Government of the Mediterranean Theater in 1944. What's going on in the Mediterranean in 1944? Isn't that when we took back our system?
Isn't that when we took back what?
That's pretty much when we made our big push back into Germany. Those,
Yeah.
All right, he becomes the U.S. Deputy Rep to NATO, 1950 to 52. Basically at the onset of NATO. He's there.
Yeah, setting up Gladio for him on the inside.
Mm-hmm. He was a lawyer at the firm of Davis, Polk, and Wardwell. That's important. And he's also president of the Metropolitan Opera, so he is high society. I brought up this law firm because this was the chief counsel of J.P. Morgan. They would help create General Electric. Grover Cleveland was actually a member of the firm. More recently, this firm clients during the Great 2008 and 2009 included the Treasury Department, Central Bank of New York, AIG, Freddie Mac, Lehman Brothers, and Citigroup.
And the fact that they were the law firm of General Electric, you find General Electric in everything. The Bolshevik Revolution, as the original members, electrifying Russia afterwards. You find them in all of the coups. They have interest throughout all of Latin America, Africa. They were all over, the people that were involved in that company.
Yeah, there's a few other, yeah. Some more really fun alumni of the law firm, just to show you how powerful they are. Kirsten Gillibrand, 3 chairman of the SEC, current chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, 1 secretary treasurer, a guy by the name of Ogden Livingston Mills, and Eli Whitney Debevoise. Robert Harrison, who became the CEO of the Clinton Global Initiative. And, of course, Andrew Yang.
That's quite a lineup.
Yeah. So that is Mr. Charles Spofford. Quite a career. All right. Back to one of our other favorites, Mr. McGeorge Bundy. Pictured here is the 5th National Security Advisor. He is class of 1940, and his name was Odin. Well, of course, he went to the Groton School. In World War II, he was an officer because he had poor vision. Couldn't become an infantryman. So in 43, he becomes the 8th Rear Admiral Alan Kirk. Gatekeeper, right?
Yes.
He's discharged as captain in 46, goes back into academia, we think. He becomes the speechwriter for the...
But do you have when he became the dean of Harvard?
I can get that here real quickly.
I got it.
Yeah, go ahead.
At 34 years old, the youngest dean of Harvard ever.
Outstanding. So in 49, he joins the Council of Foreign Relations as a Marshall Plan analyst on the covert side, and he worked on that subcommittee with Eisenhower, Allen Dulles, CIA's Richard Russell Jr., and George Kennan.
Setting up Operation Gladio.
Yeah. He becomes the National Security Advisor from 51 to 66, which means he was in charge of the Bay of Pigs, the Missile crisis, and the Vietnam escalation.
Yep. He was actually kind of behind the whole Gulf of Tonkin issue and drafting the resolution to commit military forces afterwards. So they set up the false flag so they could go into Vietnam to secure the opium to supply Operation Gladio.
Yeah, guys, I really am sorry about the echo. It's Rumble's not letting me use my mic, so I'm going straight off the laptop, and I'm doing the best I can. So I apologize. I don't know if I can get it edited out, but we're doing the best we can. All right, he would then become the chair of the 303 committee. Did we talk about that before?
I've talked about it a lot, but go ahead.
Well, no, if you got the info in your head, I won't pull up my notes.
Well, the 303 committee is basically it was the mechanism to coordinate covert operations.
Very good. He'd leave that and become the president of the Ford Foundation because, of course, he did.
So, see, I'm making the assumption that all of this, he never got out of intel.
No, of course not. You never do.
Yeah, because every single thing he did had tentacles to the CIA.
Yeah, and that's where the Ford Foundation comes in.
Yes.
Then, of course, he testifies at the Church Committee and lies his ass off.
Yes, he did.
And then he would then be employed by none other than the Carnegie Corporation till he died in 96 from a heart attack.
Which again is used for CIA front money.
Yes. Okay. 2 more. And they're fun ones.
And I just want to add, I have in my notes that his oldest son, William Bundy, works in the CIA and State Department. And his other son, Harvey Bundy, was a Yale graduate, was in intelligence during Vietnam, and was associated with the CIA.
Yeah, we did a whole series. We did a whole show on the Bundys. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
What else do I have on Bundy? There would be something else. Yeah, we forgot about Harvey Bundy, who was a special assistant to Secretary of War Stinson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Grandson
keeping it in the family.
Yeah. Grandson of Solomon Bundy, and of course they're related to the Auchinclosses family.
Yep. Which is Jackie Kennedy's family.
There you go. All right. Townsend Hoops II. Didn't get a picture of him off Wikipedia, but I did find this when he's on C-SPAN. All right. He is in the class of 1944, captain of the Yale football team, was a U.S. Marine lieutenant in the Pacific, where he fought at Iwo Jima and the occupation of Japan. 47 of 48, he becomes the assistant chairman of the House Armed Service Committee and became the staff aide / gatekeeper to 3 secretaries: Forrestal, Marshall, and Lovett.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Goes to the private sector, becomes an author. In 64, he comes back to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Affairs, which is intelligence.
Well, international affairs in the Department of Defense basically is the liaison for, like, they basically are in charge of military cells. So they do all of the negotiations or the forcing of weapon systems on countries in order to get them under control.
Very good. All right. Our final military attached Bonesman. Guy by the name of John Chafee. Son is sitting in Congress right now. He was a United States Senator from Rhode Island until 1999. Bonesman class of 1947 from the Rhode Island political dynasty. They've had like 5 governors of Rhode Island in this family, where I'll be visiting starting tomorrow. He's a World War II Marine Corps, fought at Guadalcanal and Okinawa. Then he rejoins in 51 for the Korean War and was a rifle company commander and really sang his in the press. Apparently, he was an amazing soldier. Joins the House of Representatives in 1952. Becomes the governor of Rhode Island. 69, he becomes Secretary of the Navy under Nixon. What's going on in 69?
The Vietnam War.
Oh, yeah. Then he becomes a U.S. Senator, where he sits on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the Senate Banking Committee, and the Senate Committee on the Environment. What's going on with the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence in that time period, besides the end of the Cold War and everything that happened after that?
Well, that would be from 76 to 99 was when all of these fake banks popped up, like BCCI and Nugent Hand. And he obviously, given the crossover between intelligence and banking, was a key gatekeeper there.
Okay, so let's give it a wrap. After 30-something weeks of going through Skull and Bones, our original question is this just a fraternal networking club, or have we made the point that they may be just a bit more?
They are 100% a controlling mechanism behind the scenes to orchestrate events.
Yeah, they don't rule the world, but they sure do guide it. Ladies and gentlemen, Skull and Bones.
Well done. And again, I just want to compliment you. Having that graph is fantastic because it puts in a picture the amount of control that these people have had.
Yeah, and I'll have more for our next. I'm going to start using the Neuro board for all of these going forward if I have the time to put them together. And
Yeah.
So,
well, definitely for a summary, because that's critical to making the point.
Well, we're on to some other secret societies going forward. I think next week we're going to do a quick hiatus because I've got some juicy stuff on UBS, Union Bank of Switzerland, and it ties into some of the other banks we've looked at. But this one in particular gets out like next week, and
Awesome.
And you are going to see some fun connections.
I can't wait. Because I think one of the most fascinating parts of Gladio is the banking. The Deutsche Bank, the HSBC, and as we've said, BCCI, Nugent Han, the whole savings and loan thing, it just keeps coming up. So I think this will be a good thing to kind of delve into so people can kind of wrap their head around just how important the banking segment is to making this entire wheel turn.
Yeah, and all wars are banker wars.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, I'm very humbled to be part of this with you because I think the two of us together brings a view with your banking experience, my military experience, and the Operation Gladio that no one's ever looked at this the way you and I do.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I mean, you being my co-host on this does more. It's a multiplying effect, and I really do enjoy. I mean, we don't even need the video. We can just get on the phone and have this exact same conversation, and we do,
and have many times.
So, hey, yeah. I want to thank the audience. You guys have been great. A lot of good encouragement, outstanding questions, and we'll have more for you coming soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Cheers.